At the bottom of South America, there's a country that feels like it was built from different worlds. In the north, waterfalls explode with more force than Niagara. In the south, glaciers groan, split, and collapse like something alive. Farther down, a lonely town stands at the edge of the map and calls itself the end of the world. This is Argentina. Not the Argentina most people imagine, but the wild, unpredictable, almost unreal Argentina, where every landscape seems to break the rules of nature. And once you see what is hidden here, you will understand why this country is impossible to forget. Argentina stretches so far, nearly 3,700 kilometers north to south, that it holds subtropical jungle and Antarctic wind in the same country, sometimes in the same week of travel. Few nations compress this many contradictions into one shape on a map. Over the next few minutes, we'll move from a city built to impose order into landscapes that have never once asked for permission.
Buenos Aires was laid out on a grid so rigid you could set your watch by its right angles. A European capital dropped onto South American soil. Iguazu Falls is not one waterfall, but 275, spread across a curved cliff nearly 3 kilometers wide. Perito Moreno is one of the only glaciers on Earth that is actually holding steady, while almost every other glacier on the planet retreats. And in the far north, mountains rise striped in 14 distinct colors, the result of 600 million years of mineral layers stacked like sediment in a jar.
Now, let's explore the places that make Argentina one of the most fascinating landscapes on Earth. Imagine a city that decided, from its very first street, exactly what kind of place it wanted to be. Buenos Aires doesn't sprawl the way most Latin American capitals do. It was drawn, literally, on paper in the 1580s as a grid of perfect right angles, wide avenues, and formal plazas, a European fantasy transplanted onto the edge of the Rio de la Plata. Walk through Recoleta at golden hour, and the light catches rows of mausoleums so ornate they look like a miniature city built for the dead.
The air here carries the smell of grilled beef drifting from corner parillas, mixed with something sweeter, dulce de leche from a bakery window, cut through by diesel exhaust and river damp. In La Boca, the houses are painted in scavenged ship paint. Whatever colors dock workers had left over a century ago became a neighborhood's entire identity, now immortalized for tourists who've never smelled a shipyard. Here's the twist. Buenos Aires was built to impose order on a wild continent, yet its most famous export, tango, was born in the opposite spirit. It emerged in the 1880s from the city's roughest immigrant slums, an improvised, restless dance that the elite initially despised before it conquered Parisian ballrooms and, eventually, Buenos Aires itself.
Standing in a milonga at midnight, watching strangers move in practiced silence, you sense it. This is a city of grids that somehow keeps producing chaos it can't fully contain. The order
was only ever surface deep. Argentina's real story begins where the grid runs out. Have you ever wondered what it sounds like when a river decides gravity isn't a suggestion? Iguazu Falls doesn't announce itself gradually. You hear it minutes before you see it. A low, constant roar building through the jungle canopy, growing until conversation becomes pointless. Then the forest opens, and 1.7 kilometers of cliff drops away into 275 separate cascades, spraying mist so thick it forms its own weather system above the water. The centerpiece is a horseshoe-shaped chasm locals call the Devil's Throat, where 14 individual falls converge into a single roaring pit. Stand on the viewing platform and the spray soaks you from 80 meters away, cool against skin that was sweating through subtropical humidity moments earlier. Iguazu moves roughly 4 times the average volume of water Niagara does, more during flood season. Rainforest teeming with toucans, coatis, and over 2,000 plant species exists in the same frame as a geological wound this violent. Nothing here has been engineered, softened, or contained. Where Buenos Aires imposed a grid on the land at Iguazu simply refuses. It's the first hint that Argentina's landscapes don't adapt to human comfort. They expect you to adapt to them. Further south, that same defiance takes a colder, slower form. Here's something that shouldn't make sense. While nearly every glacier on Earth is retreating, some losing hundreds of meters a year, one glacier in Argentine Patagonia has spent decades doing something almost no other ice field does. It holds its ground, advancing and collapsing in a cycle so stable that scientists have studied it for over a century, trying to understand why. It isn't melting away like the others. It's fighting a war of attrition with the mountains around it. And for now, remarkably, it's roughly even. Imagine standing in front of a wall of ice, 60 meters tall, 5 times the height of the building you might live in, and hearing it breathe. Perito Moreno groans constantly, a deep structural creak of ice under its own impossible weight, punctuated every so often by a crack like distant thunder as a slab the size of an apartment building shears off and collapses into Lake Argentino. The temperature drops noticeably as you approach the viewing platforms, cold air rolling off 250 square kilometers of compressed ice, carrying a mineral scent that's hard to place, something between wet stone and nothing at all. What makes this glacier a genuine anomaly is its equilibrium. Most glaciers worldwide are shrinking under a warming climate. Perito Moreno, fed by heavy Andean snowfall and a uniquely stable ice field above it, has remained in near balance for decades, advancing until it dams the lake entirely, then rupturing in a dramatic ice bridge collapse that draws crowds every few years. There's something almost defiant about it. Everywhere else on the planet, ice is losing its argument with time. Here, for now, it isn't. You watch a piece calve into the lake, sending up a wave that rocks tour boats hundreds of meters away, and you understand something about this country. Argentina's landscapes don't request accommodation from the forces around them. The glacier isn't adapting to a warming world. It's simply holding on its own terms for as long as its geography allows. To the north, a different kind of stubbornness, rises straight out of the earth. Fitzroy doesn't rise gradually the way most peaks do. It erupts, a spire of near vertical granite stabbing 3,405 meters into the Patagonian sky, so sheer that its upper walls barely hold snow. Local Tehuelche people called it Chaltén, Smoking Mountain, because clouds constantly wreathe its summit, torn apart by winds that can exceed 100 kilometers per hour even on a calm-looking day. The town at its base, El Chaltén, didn't exist until 1985. Argentina built it almost overnight in a border dispute with Chile, reasoning that a functioning town would strengthen its territorial claim faster than any treaty negotiation. A settlement founded not for tourism, not for resources, but as a geopolitical chess move. It worked, and hikers have been grateful for it ever since. Trek toward the base at dawn, and you'll understand why climbers call this range one of the most technically demanding on Earth. The wind here doesn't gust politely. It slams, sudden and sideways, strong enough to knock an unprepared hiker off balance. Clouds part for minutes at a time, revealing the full spire in raking orange light, then swallow it whole again. Fitzroy wasn't fully summited until 1952, and even now, experienced climbers get turned back by weather more often than not. This is a mountain that has never once compromised for anyone standing beneath it. The same defiance running through the glacier, the falls, the entire southern spine of this country. Further north, that defiance meets something older than the mountains themselves. Imagine standing at the base of a mountain so tall that its summit sits in the stratosphere's doorstep, higher than any point in North America, higher than anything outside the Himalayas themselves. Aconcagua rises 6,961 meters above Mendoza's wine country, a jagged, ice-streaked colossus visible from vineyards nearly 100 kilometers away. Its name likely comes from Quechua, roughly translating to stone sentinel, and it guards its summit fiercely. Winds near the top can exceed 160 kilometers per hour, strong enough to strip tents apart in minutes, and the mountain generates its own localized storms, clear morning sky curdling into whiteout conditions within the hour. The air thins brutally with every step upward. At base camp, the temperature can swing from scorching daytime sun to a bitter, bone-deep cold within hours. A dry, thin cold that carries almost no moisture, cracking lips and skin. Climbers describe a strange stillness near the summit, sound swallowed by altitude, breath the only thing they can hear. Unlike Everest, Aconcagua requires no technical climbing gear on its standard route. No ropes, no ice axes for most climbers, and yet it kills nearly as many hopefuls per year, almost entirely through altitude sickness, because the mountain punishes impatience rather than inexperience. Roughly 6 in 10 climbers who attempt the summit turn back before reaching it. This is where Argentina's tension sharpens to its extreme. The mountain does not adapt 1 degree for the people climbing it. Every acclimatization day, every rest stop, every turned-back attempt is a human conceding ground to stone and altitude. Proof that the only real strategy here has always been theirs to adapt, never the mountain's.
At the bottom of the map, past the last highway sign, sits a city that calls itself Fin del Mundo, the end of the world. Ushuaia sits on the Beagle Channel, mountains rising directly from the water on one side, the open reach toward Antarctica on the other. Weather can shift 4 times in an hour. Sun, hail, fog, sun again, as if the sky itself can't commit to a decision. This was a 19th century penal colony, built specifically because it was considered too remote and too hostile for prisoners to escape. Today, it's the final departure point for nearly every Antarctic expedition on Earth, the last stable ground before ice takes over completely. Standing at the shoreline, watching an expedition ship pull out toward open water, you feel the entire country behind you. A nation of grids and glaciers, waterfalls and colored mountains, all funneling down to this single wind-scoured edge. In Argentina, control and adaptation aren't opposites so much as 2 answers to the same question. How do you live somewhere too vast to fully master? Buenos Aires answered with a grid, a plan, an imposed order that tango immediately complicated. Iguazu and Perito Moreno answered by simply refusing to negotiate. Water and ice moving on schedules no city planner could set. Fitz Roy answered with pure wind-torn defiance. By the time you reach Ushuaia, at the literal edge of habitable land, you understand that Argentina was never really one country's story. It's the story of every possible relationship between people and a landscape that never once asked to be tamed. Some places bending it slightly, most places simply enduring it on their own terms, exactly as they always have. If these landscapes sparked your curiosity, subscribe for more journeys across extraordinary places. And tell me in the comments, would you rather stand at the edge of a glacier that refuses to melt, or in a valley that spent centuries learning to bend without breaking?